Hey, what's up everybody? True Boxing here. Thank you for coming back to get hit with the truth. So today we're doing the end of the year champions report on the WBA, the World Boxing Association, and all their titles from 122 pounds to heavyweight. So this is basically just like a breakdown of how all the titles, what happened with all the belts, who became the champions, all the info that you need to know, kind of a year in review of the WBA world title. You know, this one, the WBA is continuing to try to consolidate world titles into one champion per division. But this has nothing to do with the regular belt. This is the main world title. So we start with the 122-pound super bantamweight championship, which heading into the year was held by the undefeated WBA and IBF champion, unified champ, Marajan Akhmadaliyev, or MJ as his nickname is. You know, MJ came in really as the reigning champ, you know, and in June, he made a mandatory defense against Ronnie Rios, the veteran, former world title challenger. And you know, this fight, Rios, we knew Rios was going to bring the action, but Marajan, or MJ, was just 5 steps ahead of him. It seemed like he was just outboxing, outclassing, and hitting him with hard shots. And he ended up breaking his hand in that fight, but still finished the fight. And in a fight that he was well ahead of on the scorecards, he went after it and got the knockout in the 12th round of Rios impressively, as he stayed undefeated and held on to his unified belt. So he did not fight the rest of the year because of his hand injury that he suffered there. That kind of killed any talks of an undisputed title fight with Stephen Fulton Jr. Now he's been ordered by the IBF to make a mandatory defense against former world title challenger Marlon Tapoulis, and they've been given an extension for a couple weeks. So probably just after the new year, the fight's gonna go to a purse bid, and we're gonna see when they will lock horns. I think it's going to be in the first quarter of the year, within the first 3 months. After that, it's kind of up in the air, because we don't know what's going to go on with Stephen Fulton and Brandon Figueroa in their rematch. That's, you know, their proposed rematch that's supposed to take place at 126 for the interim title there. If Fulton goes and defeats Brandon Figueroa at 126, I think he's going to stay there, obviously. But if he loses, he might stay there anyways. And with Naoya Inoue moving up into the 122-pound division, again, it's kind of wide open to see what goes down. Personally, I think MJ is probably going to make another mandatory. Maybe he'll fight its WBA mandatory #1 contender, Azat Havanassian, finally in the second half of the year. And then when the smoke clears from that, if he's still champ, he might be rolling into 2024 with an undisputed title fight on the line against Inoue, the monster. Because again, Inoue's moving up in the division. If Fulton's moving up, then Inoue and MJ fight might not be so difficult to get made. So we just got to see what happens. But MJ, I think he needs to stay at 122 and keep doing his thing with his titles. I think he'll get by Tapoulis and then move on. Now we move to 126, featherweight. Entering the year as champion was Leo Santa Cruz. He was a super champ. He had been champion for 3 years in February of 2022. He had been champ for 3 years since defending it. He hadn't defended his title since February of 2019. For some reason, the WBA let him hold on to the belt, and he was scheduled to fight Lee Wood at some point, after Lee Wood, the regular champion, made a mandatory defense of his regular belt against Michael Conlon. So that fight was on the table, and they were negotiating it. It looked like it came close, and then out of nowhere, the two sides agreed to take another fight in between. Lee Wood was going to defend his regular belt against Mauricio Lara, and Santa Cruz was going to attempt to unify belts against Ray Vargas. That was excitingly setting up kind of a 4-man little tournament there, but that didn't come to fruition. They ended up fighting Santa Cruz, and that didn't happen because Lee Wood got injured for his fight, and then Ray Vargas decided to move up to 130 and challenge for the WBC title there. So that left Santa Cruz and Wood again to negotiate. They started negotiating again, and then finally this month, December, Leo Santa Cruz decided to vacate the WBA title and not be its champion anymore. I think he wasted everybody's fucking time. It's bullshit. But Lee Wood was upgraded to full champion. He's a fighting champion. I personally think Lee Wood's going to fight Mauricio Lara next, because they were supposed to fight in September, and he had to pull out with an injury. So I think he'll get that fight with Lara done. After that, personally, if he fights Lara, I think he's going to get knocked out. I think he's going to get beat. I know there's talks about Lee Wood and Josh Warrington, but Warrington is not, I don't think he'll be physically ready, and Lee Wood hasn't fought since March of last year against Michael Conlan, so he's probably going to be good to go and want to get back in the ring right away. And the fight with Lara was already on the table, and I think it's an easily made fight. So I really think we're going to see Lee Wood and Mauricio Lara next. After that, it's kind of up in the air to see what happens with the WBA belt in 2023. 130 pounds, super featherweight. The champion coming into the year was reigning champ Roger Gutierrez. Roger Gutierrez was supposed to fight Chris Colbert in February in a mandatory title defense, but Gutierrez had to pull out last minute with an injury. Hector Luis Garcia stepped in and handled Chris Colbert, made himself the #1 contender for that belt, and in August, the two collided on Showtime for the WBA title, and Hector Luis Garcia completely outboxed and outclassed Gutierrez to capture the WBA belt and is now the new champion. Well, Hector Luis Garcia got an opportunity of a lifetime. On January 7th of 2023, he's moving up to 135 and is going to challenge for the regular title against undefeated Gervonta Tank Davis. Now, nobody expects Garcia to win that fight because it's supposed to be a prelude to Davis and Ryan Garcia fighting in April. But if he, I'm going to go with what I believe is going to happen. I believe he's going to lose the Tank, but then he's going to be able to move back down and defend his title. It could be against Chris Colbert in a rematch, or it could be against Lamont Roach Jr., who's the WBA's #1 contender right now. So we'll see what happens for Hector Luis Garcia after the Tank fight takes place on January 7th on Showtime. 135, lightweight. George Kambosos Jr. was undefeated, entered the year as the WBA and unified lightweight champion of the world. He was supposed to fight Vasily Lomachenko. Lomachenko decided to go and defend his country, Ukraine, against Russia in their war effort. And when that happened, Devin Haney stepped in to fill the void, signed a contract to fight Kambosos in June for the undisputed lightweight championship of the world. Devin Haney went to Australia and completely outboxed George Kambosos Jr., outclassed him to a 12-round unanimous decision. But there was an automatic rematch clause in the contract. Kambosos cashed in on that, and in October, they met again on ESPN for the undisputed title, and Devin Haney dominated Kambosos even more so this time. This time, he legitimately beat him up, almost stopped him, and retained the undisputed title. Heading into 2023, now that Lomachenko has come back, there's, everybody's talking that it's going to be Haney versus Lomachenko for the undisputed title in the first half of the year. I believe that's going to be the fight. Haney signed a 3-fight contract with ESPN and Top Rank, and the first 2 were against Kambosos. I think it's a good way to close out that deal, and I believe Lomachenko is going to defeat Devin Haney to become the undisputed champ at lightweight, but you never know. We'll see what goes down. But if that happens, and then it's kind of wide open, because I personally feel Gervonta Tank Davis is going to get knocked out against Ryan Garcia, and then after that, I don't think he's going to want to fight the remainder of the year, and which is going to leave things kind of up in the air for what goes on with the lightweight title at that point. So I think Lomachenko could hold on to it and fight somebody else, or he could vacate that belt. It's just really up in the air after the Haney and Lomachenko showdown takes place, and there's going to be a lot riding on Ryan Garcia and Gervonta Davis when they meet in their catchweight fight at 136 pounds, so we'll see. Next up at 140 is the Junior Welterweight Championship, and Josh Taylor entered the year as the undefeated WBA and undisputed Junior Welterweight champ, as he had all 4 titles. In February, he took on his WBO mandatory #1 contender, undefeated Jack Catterall, and probably should have lost. He escaped with a close split decision in a fight that was very close. A lot of people thought Catterall won, and he also scored a knockdown, but Taylor got out of there with a controversial split decision. Now, Taylor was going to move up in weight and vacate all his belts, but he had a lot of backlash about the Catterall fight, so he decided to vacate 3 of his 4 belts and to take on Catterall in a rematch, which is coming up in 2023 here. So the title went vacant, the WBA belt, and Alberto Puello was then thrown in there against, God, I keep forgetting the guy's name that he fought. It was an absolute barn burner, though, and for the vacant title in August. And Puello got out of there with a very close split decision victory as he claimed his first world title. He was supposed to be fighting Ishmael Barroso, was supposed to be the next mandatory, but I just heard the other day that Gary Antoine Russell, the undefeated contender at 140, is in line to fight Puello next, with the winner having to fight Ishmael Barroso. If that happens, I think Russell's going to be your new champion, and then I think he'll handle Barroso probably towards the middle of the year or into the early summer. And then I think by the end of the year, we could be seeing Gary Antoine Russell attempting to unify belts against Sudriel Matias, who's fighting Ponce, Jeremias Ponce, at some point early in 2023. So for the vacant IBF title. So a lot of big doings happening for the WBA belt at 140, and I think Gary Russell is going to stake his claim on the division this year by capturing that WBA belt first, if that's the case between him and Puello. 147 welterweight, Yordenis Ugas entered the year as the new champ after he had dominated Manny Pacquiao last year. Actually, he wasn't the new champ. He had retained the title against Pacquiao in August, and Pacquiao retired. So immediately, Ugas and Errol Spence, the other undefeated unified champ, decided to unify belts again. So 3 of the 4 welterweight titles were on the line. Ugas had one moment where he caught Spence off guard, but the remainder, he got thoroughly broken down and the shit beat out of him by Errol Spence Jr. Errol Spence dominated him and stopped him after 10 rounds with a TKO victory as he became the unified champ, but he is now the holder of 3 of the 4 belts. The remainder of the year for Spence was trying to lock down an undisputed title fight with Terrence Crawford, and that did not happen. They were very close. It was supposed to happen. They were even talking about early in 2023 for it to happen, and then Crawford pulled out, and the fight did not go on. Now, Spence was ordered by the WBC to fight their mandatory, which is former champ Keith Thurman. It's probably the biggest name he can get at welterweight besides Crawford. But Spence just the other day said he has plenty of options heading into the year. He says he's returning in April, May, or June. Now, Crawford just beat Avanesian in December. Can him and Spence seriously still happen? It's up in the air. We really don't know is the question. What's going to go down? They could fight for undisputed, and then after that, if he loses, he's not going to hold the belt. Crawford becomes champion, which I think he would, but we don't know who he's going to fight. If he fights Thurman, I think he beats Thurman, but then the second half of the year, he's going to have to make at least one mandatory defense, and he's going to have a couple mandatories due. He's going to have Jaron Boots Ennis in for the IBF, and he's going to have the winner of Imantas Stanionis and Virgil Ortiz Jr. for the WBA belt. They're fighting for the regular belt. So it's really up in the air on what happens with the WBA title at welterweight next and throughout the year. So I'm really excited to see what happens. I do believe we're going to consolidate and have one WBA champion, but how we get there is still unknown right now as Errol Spence heads into the year as the reigning champ. 154, Jermell Charlo entered the year as the reigning WBA unified champion. In May, he attempted to become the undisputed champ and hold all 4 belts when he took on undefeated Brian Castano in a rematch from their 2021 bout where it ended in a controversial draw. This time, the fight was kind of going the same way, but this time, Charlo was sitting down on his punches more and landing the better, harder shots. Finally, in the 10th round, he stopped Castano impressively and became the undisputed super welterweight champion, retaining the WBA belt in the process. Going forward into 2023, we know he's fighting his WBO mandatory #1 contender in undefeated Tim Tszyu next from Australia. After that, it's unknown what Charlo is going to do. We have no clue what he's going to do after that fight. You know, if he's going to fight, you know, we don't know if he's going to take on Sebastian Fundora. Ishmael Madrimov is the #1 contender for the WBA belt. I really believe after he beat Tszyu, because I think Charlo will beat Tszyu. If he beats Tim Tszyu, I really think he's probably going to vacate 1 or 2 belts, and I think the WBA belt might be one of them. So look for that. I don't believe Charlo's going to end the year as champ. We're probably going to see a vacant title, WBA title fight at some point at 154. 160 middleweight. Ryota Murata from Japan entered the year as the reigning champ, but he hadn't fought in almost 2 years due to COVID and injuries. Finally, in April of 2022, he attempted to unify belts against Triple G Gennady Golovkin, who was the IBF champ. It was competitive for the first 5 rounds, and then Triple G took over, broke down Murata, stopped him in the 9th round as he unified the 2 belts. Then Triple G moved up to 168 to challenge Canelo for the undisputed title there. He lost the decision, but he did remind everybody at the end that he still wants to fight, and he's still a champ at 160. The WBA then ordered Triple G to fight his regular champion, Erislandy Lara, next, but then the IBF got involved and reminded, I guess, the WBA and everybody that their mandatory is due before the WBA's. So Triple G is supposed to be fighting IBF mandatory challenger Esquiva Falcao next from Brazil, and then fight Erislandy Lara after that. Now, whether he does that or not is still up in the air. We don't know if Triple G is going to hold on to his belts and honor those, or if he's going to attempt to fight a bigger name like a Jaime Munguia. I personally feel that Triple G is going to honor it. He's going to fight Falcao, I think, and then probably fight Lara or whoever the regular champion is in the second half of the year. But that's just speculation. Triple G might want to take a big fight. We'll see what goes down for that belt. 168, super middleweight. Canelo Alvarez entered the year as the pound-for-pound king and the undisputed super middleweight champion of the world, as he had all 4 titles with him. He moved up to 175 in May to challenge for the light heavyweight title. In September, after he lost that, he moved back down in September and took on Triple G in their 3rd fight, outworked them, scored a convincing unanimous decision to retain the WBA and all 4 belts. Then he was saying he was going to go back to 175 in 2023, but he says he wants a tune-up bout first, and there's a lot of people thinking that he is going to be fighting in May against his WBO mandatory challenger, John Ryder of the United Kingdom, and that it could take place in the United Kingdom. So up in the air what Canelo does, but I really believe he's going to fight John Ryder and defeat him, and then move up to 175 and challenge for the WBA light heavyweight title against Dimitri Bivol in a rematch. But you know, a lot of things could happen. It depends on what Bivol and who Bivol fights in the first half of the year. Depends on if that fight can be made, which I think it can. But, you know, we don't know, because I personally don't believe Canelo's going to beat Bivol. But if he does, I think he's going to, he's probably going to stay at 175, but who the hell knows? Canelo knows his better weights at 168. So that belt at 168 might be the only remaining regular belt by the end of the year. Or, you know, Canelo could just give it up, and David Morrell Jr. could become the WBA champion. So we'll see what happens there, you know, and see what Canelo decides to do. But at the very least, he's probably fighting John Ryder in May. 175 light heavyweight. Undefeated Dimitri Bivol entered the year as the longtime reigning champion in May. He got the opportunity of a lifetime against Canelo Alvarez, the undisputed champ at 168 and pound-for-pound king, and he took full advantage, completely outboxing Canelo, outclassing him to a unanimous decision, scoring the biggest victory of his career by far. He did not stop there, though. After Canelo decided to fight Triple G Gennady Golovkin in September, Bivol was ordered to make a mandatory defense against undefeated Gilberto Ramirez, who was probably the #3 light heavyweight in the world at the time. They fought, and Bivol completely dominated Gilberto Ramirez and scored a convincing 12-round unanimous decision there. to retain his WBA belt. Heading into 2023, you know, the world is Bivol's oyster. We don't know what he's going to do, but I'm leaning towards him possibly fighting Joshua Buatsi in the first half of the year. And he could fight Arthur Beterbiev for the undisputed title after that, or he could take on Canelo in September in a rematch, which a lot of people are thinking is more likely. But he really does have a lot of options, and I'm really excited in seeing what Bivol does, because right now, if I had to pick anybody against Bivol, I would pick Bivol to win the fight against Canelo, Beterbiev, or Buatsi, or whoever the hell else comes up. I think Bivol beats him. So we're going to see what happens with the light heavyweight title. Should be exciting. 200 pounds, cruiserweight, undefeated. Arsen Goulamirian entered the year as the reigning super champion, but he hadn't defended the title since 2019 in over 2 years. Finally, he was ordered to fight Riyad Merhi, the regular champion, in a mandatory fight. He had already beaten Merhi years earlier. Merhi backed out of that, so the WBA ordered him to take on undefeated Alexei Igorgov. They finally collided after almost a 3-year absence. Goulamirian fought and defeated Igorgov by a hard-fought 12-round unanimous decision to retain the title. So we don't know what he's going to do moving forward into 2023. I know Junior Dorticos, the former champ, is the number 1 contender in the WBA, and number 2 is former unified super middleweight champ Badou Jack, actually former 2-division champ Badou Jack. So we'll see what goes down with Goulamirian if he attempts to unify belts. Really up in the air, and we don't know, but he went coast to coast and retained his belt in 2022. And then finally, the heavyweight division. Undefeated Alexander Usyk entered the year as the WBA super champion and the unified heavyweight champ, the belts he took from Anthony Joshua in their first fight. Well, Joshua invoked his rematch clause, and finally, about 11 months later in August, the two sides locked horns. And this time it was a little bit harder, but Usyk still managed to outsmart Joshua and score a 12-round split decision and retain his unified belts. He did not want to fight before the end of the year against Fury, but heading into 2023, it looks like Usyk and Fury are going to collide for the undisputed title in 2023 in the first 3 or 4 months for sure. Fury wants it. Usyk wants it. It looks like they're going to get it done. They have to settle the mandatories that are due. They have to make all those guys happy, because the WBA did order Usyk to fight Daniel Dubois. Next, the IBF has ordered Usyk to fight Hrgovic, his number 1 contender. The WBO has an interim champion in Joe Joyce, but they haven't ordered that fight with Usyk yet. But I think they're going to make everybody happy, pay everybody off, and I think Usyk is going to attempt to become undisputed champion against Tyson Fury. And I think Fury is going to capture the WBA unified belt and become the undisputed champ. After that, though, I think Fury, if they don't rematch, I think one way or the other, he's going to vacate the WBA belt, because Dubois is in line. Daniel Dubois, the regular champ, will get upgraded to full champ. I think at some point that's going to happen in 2023. And, I think Fury will probably move on and fight his WBC mandatory and maybe hold on to 2 of the 4 belts. So that's it. That's the WBA Champions Report for the year of 2022, from every division, from 122 pounds to heavyweight. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, smash the like button, leave a comment, subscribe to the channel. I appreciate any and all support. This is True Boxing. You've been here with the truth.